This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here this Friday. It's my pleasure to introduce today's guests, Greg Bennick and Jesse Kraft. In addition to being a keynote speaker and best-selling author, Greg is also a longtime collector of error coins and has written and spoken extensively on the topic. He also serves on the board of CONECA, the Combined Organizations of Numismatic Error Collectors of America. Jesse Kraft, meanwhile, is the ANS's Resolute Americana Assistant Curator of American Numismatics. And today they'll be discussing some of the error coins in the ANS collection. And with that, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here. Greg, welcome. It's always great to have a guest with us here at the long table, especially in-house. So today we have a bunch of error coins that we want to show. Greg is an absolute expert on the topic, so I'm essentially going to be feeding him material, and then we're going to talk about it, what these various coins are, how they were made. Some of them are very, very significant pieces. So yeah, I think we should just dive right into it.
Absolutely, let's dive in.
Do you have any one that you want to start with in particular? You
know what? I mean, I love this pair, but let's dive into anything you put your hands on and see how it goes.
Okay. Let's start small and build ourselves up. Let's start with some off centers.
Sounds good.
That's something that we have a lot of people here who not only collect American, but also collect only ancients. So off-center strikings are something that I think that we can all relate to at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we're looking at an off-center coin, a planchet finds itself between the dies, hopefully right in between the dies, so that when the dies come together, the impression of the obverse and reverse die are perfect on the planchet, but that's not always the case. Sometimes a planchet is off-center between the dies, thus the name. So what we have here is a 1797 large cent, which is absolutely gorgeous. The surfaces are fantastic, and I'm going to put that right there. It's just got a nice look to it. 1797, it's got a little ding over here, but you get the point about the error that this was not situated perfectly between the dies when it was struck. I'll flip it over so you can see the reverse. It's a pretty great example. Mm-hmm. Sometimes off-centers are struck only slightly off-center. We have a few that we'll show today that were struck more so, but that's a pretty great example of an early large cent struck off-center. And here's another one from a year earlier. This has been in the collection for quite some time. It says June 9th, 1859. So this coin's been floating around here for quite a while. 1796 large cent. You can see that one as well, not situated perfectly between the dies when it was struck.
It's a beautiful coin.
Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. So we're starting off with the basics, and either of these basic coins would make any error collector, myself included, go absolutely nuts. Yeah. So those are some basics, as the case may be.
It might be quote unquote basics, but the coins that they're on are pretty significant.
Yeah, and the error type itself might be basic, but I know that when I came in, what is 2 years ago, and asked you to set aside some error coins, and you set aside this particular tray, I didn't recover for like 3 months. I think it was unbelievable, right? So let's see what Jesse has handed me here. Jesse has handed me here a fantastic 1798 large cent, which is an example now that we'll take a look at that struck much further off center than the ones that we looked at before. So still dated, which is always desirable. It's wonderful to have a date because that situates the coin historically. So we've got that 1798 date. We'll flip it over so you can see the reverse here. Struck about, 65 or so percent off center.
Yeah, so that's the way that error collectors determine how far is the design is off is by percentages. So the first two were probably 5%, something like that, and about 60%. This one is it's the same coin, but I see some dentals on the complete opposite side. Do you see that?
On the complete opposite, meaning?
Yeah, like on the blank side. On that side. So the obverse, but over here.
Oh, okay. Let's take a look. I see that.
Yeah,
so I do
see
that.
Like
that's interesting.
Weirdly double struck.
Well, I guess my guess would be, let's see what's on the reverse. It could have been contact with another coin, because I'm not seeing any design here at all. It could have been contact, and without taking a much closer look, we could be looking at the impression of dentals into the coin, if that makes sense, which could have been a coin resting on top. I'll use this poking device here to show you. There could have been a coin resting on top when maybe it was pressed against this coin and these were impressed into, because I don't think we're looking at dentals raised up, but more dentals raised in or impressed in, if that makes sense. But still,
a
great observation. And
something weird happening.
Well, I like that. And something weird happening is how a lot of error research gets done. You know, we see something weird on a coin that we can't explain, whether that's a coin 50% off center or dentals that don't make sense. And then we have to kind of do back steps in our minds, like what do we know about the minting process and where could that have happened or not happened? That helps us speak to authenticity, but also method about how a coin was made. So, yeah, we can have further dentals conversations sometimes.
Indeed. Here's to show that not all off-centers only happen on large cents.
That's exactly right. This is an 1836 half dollar, and it's quite fantastic. It's off-center, but it's also double struck, and I didn't notice that when I was here last time. It's been double struck off center, but I'm going to focus on the fact that it's off center for right now, and also the fact that it's marked on the holder here at the ANS as Overton 119, and I bring that up only because I showed a picture of this to a half dollar expert, and he said, that's not Overton 119, that's Overton 112. So I probably shouldn't have even brought this up because the Overton people who are watching today, I know are very serious about their Overton varieties. So I will leave this up to the Overton folks to decide what it is. And even, you know what, even as I'm looking at this now, those dentals right there, I mean, that too, like the last coin, that could be evidence of a double strike. It could also be evidence of a coin being impressed in there, because I'm not seeing that same evidence on this side. Regardless, what we have here is a fantastic error on a half dollar. Yeah. I mean, visually interesting. And you know what, I'll point people, if you're interested in half dollar errors from that era, Henry Hilgard had an extraordinary collection of half dollar errors. And I know that Sheridan Downey on his website has a historical archive of that collection. So please look into that if that last coin interested you.
Let's go with that 2-cent coin just to show you how far we can get here.
Yeah, and it's not just how far. Okay, so we've been talking about how we're starting slow. And in terms of starting slow, it's that, here's an error type that's easy to understand, an off-center coin, right? But depending on the denomination, now things get really interesting. And what we have here is an off-center 2-cent piece, already fascinating. We have an off-center 2-cent piece that struck about 99% off-center. And I should say that the amount off-center doesn't dictate how important the off-center is. Some people like coins that are struck 50% off-center because you have the perfect combination of blank planchet area and detailed coin design on the same coin. When you're talking about an off-center 2-cent piece, it honestly, I mean, come on now. I mean, any off-center 2-cent piece is fascinating. This is an incredible thing. And the last time I was here, there's so many fascinating things that I went, oh yeah, off-center 2-cent piece. And that's what I mean. I got back to Seattle and I thought, wait a minute, and I had to stop doing things for a couple days to think about it. This is a fascinating coin. This is a 2-cent piece that was struck about 99-ish, 98% off center. You can see a little bit of design there. Flipping it over, you can see a little bit more design here. And that's been in the collection for quite a while as well. Fascinating stuff.
So close to just being a blank planchet.
Yeah, so close to being a blank planchet. Yeah. You know, if it had been struck further off center, the dies would have missed completely, right? Or it would have missed the dies itself and just bypassed them somehow, some way, but still.
This next piece is very much off-center as well, but it's also, I mean, we showed you a lot of 19th century coins, and this is just to show you that things are still happening. I mean, error coins aren't a thing of the past. Here we have a modern Roosevelt dime that is also very, very much off-center.
Yeah, and I like that too, because you know, when people see coins, like some of the coins we have shown you and that we will show you today are inaccessible to all humans, not just because they're in the ANS collection, but you couldn't find another example if you tried. This is an example of a coin that you could. So if you're interested in errors or wanted examples for your collection, there are off-center Roosevelt dimes in the world. In fact, quite a few of them. It's a pretty interesting example here. This one struck, I don't know, 95, as Jesse was saying, % off-center. But it certainly is something you could find in the world if you wanted to educate yourself or start building a collection. So this coin was struck, I would say, I don't know, 90-something % off-center. We see In God We Trust. We see the tiny little bit of the bust there. Flipping it over, We see a little bit of the word states. And this is absolutely a modern example of some of the things that we're talking about throughout the rest of the presentation today.
Yeah, unfortunately you can't date it. The date is off. I mean, you can date it to, it's a clad, so post-1965.
Yeah.
Probably based on the design, the dye is probably the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, probably 80s or
like
90s. Yeah.
It's been here since 1994, so it can't be newer than that. Yeah.
So we know it's 1994 or before, and that's the kind of research or sleuthing, I guess you'd say, that helps determine sometimes what an error is, when it's from. If you can't see the date on the coin, but you can see evidence of a variety that's only known for 1 year of that coin type, all of a sudden you know your off-center 3-cent piece is this date based on a variety alone. So Jesse's put a coin in front of me now that's known as a clipped planchet. Just to get a little bit into the minting process, and I love talking about the minting process. Every summer I co-teach the class on mint errors and varieties and the minting process in Colorado Springs for the ANA summer seminar. And one of the things we get into is how errors are made. In fact, that's all we talk about. So in this case, you've got a planchet strip that's feeding through a cutting tool, let's just say, that cuts out blanks from a planchet strip. Well, if that strip, as it's going through those cutters, for lack of a better word, hesitates or allows itself to be positioned where cutters are coming down over a previously punched area, you get a blank cutout, which later becomes a planchet, later becomes a coin, that has an area cut out essentially from that surface, but it hasn't been cut out. It's incomplete. So the colloquial term for these are clipped planchets, but they haven't been clipped. They are incomplete. Technically, an incomplete planchet is more accurate. Clipped, of course, refers to earlier coins that were shaved off the sides that allowed for unscrupulous people to acquire extra silver that they were shaving off the edges of coins. You do that enough, you've got a pile of silver, you can trade that in for real money, and the person spending that coin didn't realize that it was just shaved a little bit off the side. That's why reading was added to coins, of course, to prevent that. But this is a 1959 cent with a clip planchet. Again, a coin that you certainly could find out in the wild. I don't know if you're going to find one in a roll, but you certainly would be able to find one at a coin show if you wanted to start building an error typeset for your collection.
So one thing that sometimes happens is that people will actually clip a regular 1 cent piece to sell it as a quote-unquote clipped planchet error. One of the ways that you could tell is something known as the Blakesley's effect.
I like that.
So if you want to show it again, you can see it a little bit on there. And the Blakesley's effect is the way that metal flows because there is a blank area on the complete opposite side of where the clip is. Metal didn't completely fill that area. So if you can see where Greg is pointing, it's a little bit less struck up. You can see that the words "In God We Trust" aren't as full as the other portions. That's the Blakesley's effect.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking on the guy's name.
Well, his name was Blakesley.
Mr. Blakesley.
Yeah, so he was. And what happens in the minting process is that as a planchet, or as a blank, after a blank is struck, it goes through an upset mill. And the upset mill is a machine of slightly narrower diameter than the blank itself. And as that blank is pushed or rolled through, essentially, that upset mill, it raises up the periphery of the coin to kind of form that proto-rim, essentially, around the edge of the coin, the circumference of the coin. And when a coin is struck, that is what gives us the rim that lets coins stack more easily, primarily, but also protects the design too. So as it's going through the upset mill, as Jesse so clearly said, and rightly so, as that upset mill is pressing on this side here, directly opposite where that clip is, there's no pressure to press back, which is why this area of the rim is weaker. So Mr. Blakesley noticed that and gave his name and the phenomenon to the world. So we talk about the Blakesley effect.
Yep. Here's another clip planchet. It's not as significant, but it's on $50, so a bigger coin. They might be a little bit less common on bigger silver coins. You can still see the Blakesley's effect a little bit there.
Yeah, for sure.
That one has seen some circulation, so even though it's an error coin, it did slip out into the wild, and it took a few years perhaps before someone saw the significance in it.
Yeah, I'll just say, just for a moment, we see the letters G-O-D here for God. They look like they're almost flowing off the edge of the coin. I like to tell students that metal flow doesn't lie. Metal doesn't lie. And you either see evidence of authenticity or not from metal flow. And here, when this coin was struck on a planchet that was incomplete, the metal from the letters G-O-D flowed, the metal flowed into that unstruck area because there was nothing there to push back against the dies. And that metal flow speaks to absolute authenticity on a clip, or helps us know that that clip is not authentic. Meaning if there's no metal flow, that's one thought. We can think, there's no metal flow. Somebody might have made this. Let's look for some other markers, like the Blakesley effect.
Right. So here's a coin that at first glance almost appears like a clipped planchet, but as you'll see, it's actually quite more significant than that.
I agree. So let's take a look at this one, because this is an 1861 Indian cent. And what Jesse's referring to when he says a clip planchet, you might wonder, some of the clips that we saw before, all of them were curved. It's possible that a coin is struck on a planchet that was cut from the edge of a planchet strip or from the end of a planchet strip. And those areas of incompleteness will be more straight or perhaps ragged. And at first glance, that's what this looks like. But we always need to look at both sides of a coin, which is why I caution people when buying errors or being interested in them to ask a seller or anyone showing it to you to show you both sides. Because as we flip this over, you'll notice that the other side is striated. And what happened here is that this actually this is part of a coin, part of a complete coin. Imagine out there in the world there being the other part of this. This is a split planchet essentially. This split off from a coin that was that filled in that area, and undoubtedly there was or is a coin. I would love to find the other that has the rest of the design on the front. And due to impurities in the metal, this portion of this split away. We see these oftentimes not as dramatic, called laminations, but this is ultimately a split planchet that is a fascinating piece.
So clipped planchets occur before striking. These happen post-striking.
Yeah.
Or during striking.
Well, and there's an example, that one in particular, of a split planchet before the strike. So this would be a perfect time to show this. We're getting into some of these coins now that are kind of beast mode coins. This is a pretty fascinating thing. What we have here is a coin that looks weakly struck. It's a Liberty nickel, 1883 Liberty nickel that looks weakly struck. Like, I wonder what happened here. Was there grease? Did somebody wear this down? Again, we need to look at both sides of the coin. So flipping this over, what we see is those same striations. This coin was struck after the planchet split. So we call it split before struck. And that piece of the coin that we saw earlier on the Indian cent split away from this Liberty nickel. And then the coin was struck. Now, because there was metal missing here, again, metal doesn't lie, there wasn't enough metal to push up against the obverse die and fill in the details of that obverse die because metal was missing from the opposite corresponding side. So the planchet here was thinner, and as a result, the dies, which are set to a certain pressure and distance, came together around less than they should have. So this fascinating coin is a split before struck or split before strike Liberty nickel. Very, very, very uncommon. Tough to find on Liberty nickels. This is another one that I got really excited about when I saw it here.
We do have a question from Larry Schwimmer. Does the Blakesley's effect occur or exist for coinage that predates collars?
That predates collars. Well, here's the thing, is that the Blakesley effect refers to an effect that happens when the coin is upset at the mint. So as long as the denomination that you're looking for, as long as the denomination you're looking at had planchets that were upset in an upsetting mill at the mint, then you're going to see the Blakesley effect, certainly. The collar, now speaking to that separately, and I know we're getting into detailed kind of status here, the collar is going to help restrain the strike. And it's most definitely possible that the area across from a clip is going to be a little weaker, but the Blakesley effect specifically is the result of the upsetting mill, and we see it most strongly with coins that have been upset by the upsetting mill.
Yeah, we have another one of those.
Yes.
And then there's some retained. So I noticed that the first coin that we showed with the split planchet was a copper nickel coin. These are all copper nickel coins that we're showing. Are split planchets more common on copper nickel coins?
Yeah, you're going to see them. You're going to see them on copper nickel coins a little more often, and I think it's because of impurities in the metal. I mean, we see a lot of laminations on Lincoln cents, which are not copper nickel coins certainly, and I'll show you what we're looking at here. We're looking at an 1887 Liberty nickel, which again, from this photo, if you just showed me that photo, I'd say, wow, that could be a straight clip along the edge of that Liberty nickel. But flip it over, and we see the same striations on the reverse. So this is, it's split from the planchet after it was struck. Anytime that you're mixing metal, it's, striking coins is science, right? Anytime you're mixing metal, you're going to potentially see impurities in that metal. And that's not because the people at the mint don't know what they're doing, it's because it happens, an air bubble or a bit of dirt or something. Let's look at this one right here as an example. So this is a 1889 Liberty nickel, and due to impurities in the metal, and I'll hold it up so you can see the fact that that's actually, it's lifted in a sense off the coin, meaning that's a piece of the coin which is lifting up, I should say. That's a better way of wording it.
Probably slip a piece of paper in there even.
You could, yeah, you could.
We don't want to, we're not going to.
Yeah, if we did, error collectors would be like texting me immediately, like, what are you doing? Do you not care about your coins? The point is that this is most definitely a lamination, right? The planchet is starting to split, and the reverse looks just great. So I'm going to hold this coin up like this, and maybe we can see, there you go, that's a little better view there. So that's happening there, and it's also happening on this Lincoln cent here. Looks like a don't know the date offhand, looks like 1917 maybe, Lincoln cent. Could be 47, not sure. But again, here we've got that laminated piece coming up off the coin, and it hasn't been helped, meaning this is probably, maybe over here somebody was playing with a fingernail long ago, but typically when you see laminations like these coins, they're not the result of people picking away at a coin, but rather impurities in the metal causing the coin metal to split apart, if that makes sense.
Shall we move on to double strikings?
Yeah, please, let's. So this coin deserves further study, okay? So this deserves further study. This is a 1913 Buffalo nickel that has been double struck. And it deserves further study because I just want to do some research on the dies itself. But let's talk about what happened here, assuming that it's absolutely legitimate, no one did anything to it. It's, we're going to look at this coin as it is. Let's take a closer look here, and you'll see that this is a double struck 1913 nickel. Now, it's got some odd toning on it, which could be chemical, PVC, we're not sure. But just in terms of the minting process itself, let's talk about what would cause this, okay? And there's some things which make me wonder about this coin just slightly, but let's talk about it in terms of what happened. So when the dies come together and they strike a coin, what should happen is that coin, that struck coin, is ejected from the striking chamber and goes off into the world and is spent on ice cream and candy and whatever we would spend money on a nickel on in 1913, probably a new car. The point is that that doesn't always happen. In the case of this coin, let's just try to think about what happened. It was struck once, normally on center. We see the evidence of that. And then we see that it was struck again. And what's unusual about this, and what causes me to kind of question, I want to sit with it a bit, is that it almost looks as though the second strike was overstruck by the first, which is very tricky to navigate in terms of trying to confirm authenticity. Meaning, I would want to take a much closer look at this coin and try to determine, was it struck by a set of false dies for that second strike, right? It just my spidey sense goes off just a little bit. I'd want to take a closer look at it. But in terms of understanding the minting process, the fact remains that this could be, and is, a great example of what can happen to a coin when it's double struck. So what we have here, is this our flip over?
Yes.
It is, yeah, it is. So this is an 1800 large cent, which shows evidence of the reverse design on the obverse of the coin. And if we flip it over, we see here just a what looks like the reverse of a large cent. But what I'd like to speak about here is the possibility of coins to be flip over double struck. So it's possible that a coin, when it is struck, instead of being ejected from the striking chamber, stays in the striking chamber and flips over and is struck again. And we see evidence of that throughout the history of U.S. federal coinage. We see coins that have the image of the reverse on the obverse, or rather details from the reverse on the obverse, details from the obverse on the reverse. It's called a flip over double strike. And the name speaks exactly to what it is, basically. But it's a fascinating moment in the striking process where a coin's not ejected and then flips over. That makes that double strike a little more desirable, or a lot more desirable, as the case may be, than a normal double strike, one that's struck on center twice.
All right, we have some, do we want to go with those or more?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, these are great. So, because it gives us a chance to talk about another aspect of the minting process too. So, let's say you're in the mint and you are striking dimes. You have loaded up a tote bin. The year is 1963. You've loaded up a tote bin of silver dime planchets. You've brought them over to the machinery that's going to strike dimes. You strike an entire tote bin filled with dime planchets, and you make those dime planchets into dimes. Well, you take that tote bin in 1963, and now your task is to strike cents. You bring that tote bin over to where cent planchets are going to be dumped into that same tote bin. What happens if, along the rim or lip at the bottom of that tote bin, which there were at the time, what if one of those dime planchets from the striking process that you just went through with the dimes, what if a dime planchet had stuck accidentally in the tote bin at the bottom of the tote bin that is now going to be filled with cent blanks? Well, here's what happens. You end up with a dime planchet that gets dislodged and is now amidst all of these cent planchets that are then sent to be struck as cents. And you get a dime that is essentially struck as a cent. And here's an example. 1963 dime planchet that has been struck by cent dies. This is a 1963 dime planchet struck by cent dies. So if we were to test that, we'd find out that it's silver, and the tag that comes with the ANS with the coin here at the ANS says purchased for $150 from Clap. So this has been around here for a while, certainly. It's a silver coin. If we were to test it, we'd find out that it was indeed silver, even if the coloration on the front might speak to toning and otherwise. It's, in my opinion, a dime struck by cent dies, or a Lincoln cent struck on a dime. So here's one that
this is a biggie.
Is a biggie.
Yeah.
This is big. Can you sense it? I don't know if you can. I mean, I'm holding the coin, so I can sense it, but this is big. So the same is true. The same process happens throughout the history of U.S. federal coinage. And some error types, or some denomination types, I should say, are much, much, much rarer when it comes to off-metal strikings. This coin struck on this type of planchet, an off-metal. In the case of 2-cent pieces, they are frighteningly rare. And this 1873 2-cent piece was struck on a planchet intended for an Indian cent. I can barely get the words out of my mouth, I'm so excited. Really though, this is a rare, rare thing. Mm-hmm. There's a handful of these known, but when I say a handful, I could not fill my hand full of the number that are known. A couple dozen, let's just say. And that's being generous. So 1873 2-cent piece struck on an Indian cent blank. If we were to weigh this, I would bet that it weighs what an Indian cent would weigh. I'll use my technical pointer here. I'll flip it over for you. Let's take a look here. Yeah, you can see the design details that are almost spilling off the edges of the coin. And the reason that's happening is that the planchet was smaller than the diameter for a 2-cent piece. So you get the planchet details for a 2-cent piece spilling over the edges of the dime, in this case, cent planchet.
Now we have a bunch of oddities here that we're going to go through kind of quickly, because I think that all of these warrant a little bit more research. Mm-hmm. They're all very weird. They all kind of shouldn't exist. They're all in the same vein as the wrong denominations that we just showed. But let's go through them anyway.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because they're all extremely interesting.
Yeah, they're
beyond
fascinating.
interesting.
Oh, for sure.
But
I
again,
agree.
probably shouldn't exist.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, is there edge lettering on the 1836 half?
There
So
is.
There is.
There is
Okay.
edge lettering on it.
It was a shield nickel. I got well.
This was a shield nickel, not a 2-cent piece.
Oh, did I say shield nickel? I said 2-cent piece, shield nickel, shield nickel. I told you I got excited about the coin, right? I told you I got excited. In fact, I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. Shield nickel struck on a cent blank. 100%.
Yeah, Greg, as long as you're looking at it,
Yep,
make sure
I got
that
it right
it's
here.
real.
I was holding it in my hands. I
It's
felt the
light,
power of the
too.
coin. Why even look at it, right? The point is
Still
that
extremely rare, though. It's still a phenomenal piece.
even more so, I would say, extraordinarily rare. And everything I said applies, even if I misspoke. The number of shield nickels struck on cent planchets could not. There's a handful known. They could not fill my hand. Everything I said still applies, even if I misspoke about the denomination. Absolutely. Thanks for that, Tony.
So it's
Appreciate
a triple wrong denomination here.
Yeah, triple wrong, and Greg Bennick was wrong. So 4 errors in one. So the coin Jesse handed to me says USA dime of 1831, overstruck with 80 reals of Spain, AU Isabella II. So I'm going to show this coin, and we can take a close look at it. And I'll use the pointer to show the undertype, or rather the overstrike, as the case may be. You see lettering all the way out to the edge, and as Jesse said, definitely worthy of some further study here. Nice. There we go. And you said you had another example, I think? And if not, we can go on to something else, too.
There's this one over the French coin.
Yeah, this is a large cent. I'm going to show it to the audience right away. A large cent overstruck. It says struck over French sou of Louis XV. So again, this is one that requires some more explanation here. But you see the, in fact, here, let's turn it around this way. And using my pointer, we see the 1 cent, right? The 1 cent of the cent design, and then the overstrike as well. Or undertype, as the case may be.
Do you want to do
I would
these?
love to.
Yeah,
I've been waiting. I'm just
So,
like,
yeah,
ugh.
pick whichever ones you want of these.
Okay, let's dive into these two, because these are absolutely monstrous. So when I came to the ANS a couple years ago, and Jesse so kindly set aside these coins, I saw these next two coins. They're Liberty nickels, and I saw these two, and at first glance, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I thought about them for a good long time because I couldn't believe they were real, not because there's any evidence of that, but because I couldn't believe that they existed because they're gorgeous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into each one at a time. So this first one is caught my eye. I'm going to show you the coin here. It's an 1895 Liberty nickel. And I'm going to show you the reverse because we need to talk about the coin based on the reverse to understand what's going on here. So what's happening here is that this coin shows evidence of liberty in reverse and in incuse. We call that, in this particular instance, it goes beyond it, but we call that a brockage. And we'll show you an example of a brockage in a little bit on a large cent. A brockage occurs when a struck coin is resting against an unstruck coin, and they are struck together, say, at the same time, for simplicity's sake, because there's a vast number of types of brockages that happen. So with that in mind, good, and actually John Kralovich just commented on the last, so that's wonderful. We'll comment on it in a minute. But when a struck coin is pressed against, or struck against, an unstruck coin, the impression left on the unstruck coin will be that of the design that was resting against it from the previously struck coin. And the remaining error, right, the one with the incuse image of that design, is called a brockage. So taking a look at this one, we've got what looks like the image of Liberty, but in reverse. In addition, there's an abnormality at the date. Let's flip it over again so you can see the other side. The coin is vastly what we would call broad struck, but it's more than that. We'll get into that in a few seconds. Broad struck occurs when a coin typically struck in a collar is struck outside of the collar, meaning the collar was not in position. So when that coin is struck, it expands vastly outward. And this coin in particular is fascinating because what happened here in my opinion, and I asked a friend also about this. My friend Mike Diamond and I took a look at this coin. And what's happened here is that a coin was struck and then struck with an indent at the date. It technically was struck once and then struck again, and then this coin here was resting on top of that, and the two were struck together. That's what created this vastly expanded look. It's not that the collar was out of position. Certainly this coin wasn't struck in collar. But what happened here is that this coin was struck up against what was a previously struck coin. And in addition, it was struck twice while in that position. And we see evidence of that in terms of the dentals around the periphery, and also in the fact that the brockage side is a double brockage, a double impression of that brockage. We see that in the stars. We see that around the profile and the periphery. So it's pretty extraordinary. That's a pretty fascinating thing. At first, when looking at that, I thought that it was struck at the same time against this coin, and it was not. And we know that because if you remember with the last coin, there is that abnormality around the date which doesn't exist here. This is a Liberty nickel which was struck, and it's a reverse cap to the reverse die. So it sat there on the reverse die and was struck once, and then undoubtedly struck again with a blank resting on top of it. That's what created that expansive look there. But this is a fascinating thing. I'm in love with it, and I think it's incredible. It's just, both of these definitely worthy of some more research, but you can see the effect of the minting process in the error itself, and use the minting process to kind of back introduce some of the information here and try to figure out what happened in the strike to make it so. But these are gorgeous, absolutely fascinating coins.
Their fields on that are perfect. It's like MS-71.
Yeah, yeah, they're gorgeous. So much so that when I saw them, I thought, there's no way these can be real, right? So, absolutely. And thanks to Saul for pointing out that it was a shield nickel on a cent planchet, not a 2-cent piece. I'll probably be hearing about that for the next 30 years or so. And that's okay. I mean, here's the thing: to be corrected by Tony Terranova and Saul Teichman, and this is good stuff. When the masters of their game correct me, I'm in great shape. Okay, so this next thing is awesome. I made mention very briefly of a mated pair of coins that were struck together at the same time. In the minting process, it's possible for two blanks or two planchets to be between the dies and be struck at the same time. It happens infrequently. Depending on the denomination or the type, it's quite rare. Sometimes it's unique or close to unique. And these two coins that I'm going to show you, and if I can get them under the scope at the same time here for you, these two coins were struck, let's see here, if we can go to our, yep, there we go. These two coins are in the collection separately, and they were in the collection separately, and Jesse brought them out to me separately, and I looked at them separately, meaning they were 10 coins apart as I was looking. We're going to look at this coin first. It's an 1897 cent, and it has been struck more than once. It has the look of a die cap, meaning a coin that stuck to the obverse die when it was struck more than once. But it most definitely was struck more than once. We see evidence of that down here. There's a little bit of a date, which is really hard to see, but it was definitely struck more than once. And I was looking at this and marveling at it. It's kind of got this three-dimensional look, absolutely gorgeous.
It's like 3 or 4 cents thick.
Yeah, it really is. And then I was really intrigued by just the fact that the reverse here has this really clear area of the shield, and then it's obscured down here, and I sort of put it aside. And I was like, wow, cool coin. And then a bunch of minutes later, I was looking at this, and I was like, wow, another cool coin. I can't believe the ANS has these amazing coins, and here we've got this coin that looks like it was struck off-cent, and I was like, wait a minute, hold on one second. And I was looking at the obscuring of the lettering here, and then I went back to my first coin, and you're going to have to forgive me for sort of manhandling these two coins, but what I realized was this is a mated pair. These coins were struck at the same time. And this coin, as I mentioned, was struck more than once. And let's just go for a second with the fact that it was struck once, which imparted the reverse details perfectly. And then, when the dies came together, and forgive me, I'm going to be very careful here and make sure that metal does not contact metal. These two coins were struck again, now both off-center, and in doing so, the design that was originally perfect here was imparted here, and these coins match together perfectly. And again, I don't want to touch metal to metal, so I don't want to rest them on top of each other, but they are an incredible match. And this coin looks like it was stuck there on the reverse die, essentially, or rather that the pressure of the strikes really pushed this into the reverse die and caused that kind of finning that we see there. But that is a mated pair of Indian cents. And that is the one which sent me reeling after I was here. I couldn't believe it. I think that we were talking. Wow, we discovered this this mated pair in the collection, and there's a bit of bravado when somebody says you've discovered something that's been in a collection since 1865 potentially, right? So it's like, because for all I know, Susie Blatnick in 1951 came in here and said, "Wow, cool mated pair," and then went for a bagel. You know what I mean? Greg didn't discover this. I noticed it, but I'm not necessarily the first. But we got excited about it because it wasn't noted as such in the collection. So that's really exciting. So here's another thing that's really exciting from the collection. This is an 1896 Indian cent. I'm checking myself on every denomination now. This is an 1896 Ike dollar? No, this is an 1896 Indian cent. I'm going to laugh about that for the rest of my life. And this is it's noted on the holder, and let me show you the holder first. It's really cool. It says United States Cent Freak, 1896. Why does it say freak on the holder? It says freak on the holder because in the early days of the error collecting hobby, before people knew to call errors errors or had names for the error type, they called them freaks at times. And they also called them FIDOs, which stood for freaks, irregularities, was it deformed coins why am I forgetting and blanking? FIDOs. Somebody can chime in with what FIDO stood for in the early days. The point is that freaks was the term that people used for error coins back in the day. And this coin has been in the collection long enough that it says freak on it because people didn't know to call it a die cap. And a die cap occurs when a planchet sticks to, let's just say, the obverse die, and then in essence becomes the die. So I'm going to raise this up and down because essentially the die goes up with that coin attached, it comes down, and the die and the coin that's attached to it strike an incoming blank, which obscures the design on the reverse a little bit. And with each successive strike and each successive new planchet that comes in, this die cap stuck to the obverse die strikes coins continually, obscuring the reverse and cupping around the die. We see it cupped, there we go. We see it cupped quite high around the die. And you see these sometimes on Lincoln cents that are cupped up a half an inch sometimes. It's pretty fascinating. So this is a really cool thing to see, a die cap on an Indian cent.
And it wore so thin that it actually busted a hole through
it.
Yeah,
let's comment on that. Great point. And you did just comment on that. If we can take a look at it again, it wore so thin that we can see through it. Like, there you go. You can see through it right there, meaning that the metal got so thin that it split.
Ripped open.
Yeah, it split essentially, because with each successive strike, as the die comes down, the metal, which doesn't lie, wraps around the die, making that area of the striking surface thinner and thinner and thinner. So, went on there. Somebody asked, did any of these coins ever circulate? And undoubtedly, yes. Some of them did. And let's take, for example, the split before strike Liberty nickel that we showed you before. I don't remember offhand the date. I think it might have been 18, whatever it might have been, split before strike. Point is, as that coin was, as it entered into circulation.
1883.
1883? Yeah, in 1883, as that coin entered circulation, sure, it was an error. Weren't called errors then. They weren't even called freaks then. What that was called was 5 cents. And it could buy a lot. So why wouldn't that circulate? Yeah. Any of these things might have circulated if they had value for what they were as a coin, because there weren't collectors of error coins, certainly, when some of these things were struck. Error coins didn't come into vogue as something to collect until much later in history. So if I had got that in change, I would have translated that into a sandwich or an ice cream, or as we joked before,
Slip
a car.
it into the Nickelodeon.
Yeah, exactly. Right into the Nickelodeon. Absolutely.
Yeah, some of these large scents certainly saw some circulation. This clipped planchet Franklin half is probably VF, EF, somewhere around there. So that was in change for a little while. You talked about broad strikes a little bit. I know that were not necessarily as glamorous as the coins that we just saw, but it's another part of the striking process.
But I like it, and I get excited about all errors. And I bought my first major error coin when I was 10, and since then I have continually loved errors, major or minor or anywhere in between, whatever they might be. So even though not as glamorous, say, as some of the Liberty nickels that we just saw or the Indian cents, it's still cool. It's got nice toning, and what happened here, I'll show you the coin so we can talk about it. 1964, a 1964 Jefferson nickel that was broad struck, meaning that the coin was struck perfectly on center, but without the collar in place. And I'm going to suggest, even looking at this coin right now, it almost looks double struck. That it was struck once on center with the collar, and then didn't leave the striking chamber. It was struck again. Again, we could take a closer look at it. The tag here says edge clip, and I might tend to disagree. I think something might have bumped into that there. But it's a really cool coin because regardless of whether double struck, which I think it was, or struck outside with the collar not in place, it's really cool because it shows what happens when the collar isn't in place. The collar is meant to keep the planchet in the chamber and within the diameter of the dies, so that when the dies come together, the coin is fully struck up. Well, if the collar isn't in place, there's nothing restraining that coin. And again, metal has to flow somewhere. That metal is going to flow out, and that planchet is going to spread out like a pancake, which is what we're seeing here. So, and important to note in terms of authenticity, we all smashed coins with hammers and things like that. Well, not we all did. You probably did, not me. The point is that if you see a flattened coin, there's going to be evidence of whatever smashed that to make it so. Here we've got design details. We've got metal, which again does not lie, flowing in the direction of where it would flow, where it would have where it would flow as a result of the strike. It speaks to authenticity. So 1964 Jefferson nickel.
All right, you just mentioned smashed coins, so I think we got to go with this one.
I love it.
This is a beautiful, beautiful coin.
So this is something that we explored right before we started. Jesse had brought it today saying, hey, I don't know if you saw this last time. I think this might be an error, but it looks like it was damaged after the fact. And it comes with this little tag that, Jesse, I'm going to let you very carefully unravel. As we show everyone the coin, I'm going to let you know that in taking a look at the coin, it's not an error coin.
At first glance.
At first glance, it looks like it. Yeah, you're not wrong to think that. So let's show them that coin. And at first glance, it looks like, what could be going on here? Might it have been, struck, multi-struck, what have you? But I'm not entirely convinced, right? So then we're just curious about it. The coin is dated 1901, and it comes with a little tag along with it. And we're going to show you that tag, and I think you should be able to see some of it. Coin, 1 cent, okay? And it says that it was placed on the rails in Sunbury by President McKinley, or near what have you? President McKinley funeral train. I don't want to manhandle this piece of paper. It's very delicate, but this is a piece of fascinating Americana. This is a non-error coin. This is an Indian cent that was placed on the train tracks as McKinley's funeral train rolled by, and somebody noted that. The piece of paper that it came on is dated 1903. So somebody probably had this for a couple years and then thought, I better write down so my kids and grandkids know what this is someday. And they wrote there on it. We discovered this literally with 2 minutes before. And you know what? We discovered this. Yes. No one else had ever discovered this before. We did it. We noticed this like 2 minutes before we started today. So you're seeing it here first. This is like a news scoop, story, and error demonstration all in one.
It's another one of these quote-unquote freaks.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a quote-unquote freak. This has been in the collection since March 1941, care of a Mrs. M. Whitehill. And this is, we'll go down here and pull this down just to touch. Oh, there we go. Thanks so much. Yeah, so let's just show you both sides of this. I'll keep my hands away. Indian cent On the other side, totally obscured. So let's say you just saw that. You might very well think, somebody smashed an 1895 cent with a hammer. Well, you got to look at both sides of an error coin. That's the two things that are wildly important if you're learning about error coins. First, look at both sides. Second, learn your denominations and coin types. Essential. I can't recommend it enough. The point is, so this is an Indian cent that was struck, and it looks like it stuck to cap 2, or at least was most definitely impressed strongly against the reverse die by the impression of a second strike. There was probably a blank in between the obverse of this and the obverse die, which caused the flattening effect that you see. But because the details on the reverse are perfect, we know that this wasn't smashed with a hammer. If one was to smash a coin with a hammer, which I would not recommend, there's no possible way the details of the reverse are going to be maintained. It's just not going to happen. The reverse details would be smashed and flattened, because if you put a coin, say, on concrete and you hit the obverse and say, look at this cool looking broad strike I just made, the reverse is going to show evidence of that abnormality and federal crime. Here what we have is an Indian cent, which is a legitimate error, and it's really a fascinating piece. Listed also as a freak.
Yes.
Oh, freaks, irregularities, defects, and we'll get the last O in there.
We have 10 minutes to get the O.
Great. We have 10 minutes to get the O.
This is a bit of a error, N variety, and,
Yeah, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about dies, and dies coming together and imparting the impression of a die, impressing the impression of a die onto a planchet, right? Thus creating the struck up details. Well, what happens if there's an error not with the strike and not with the planchet? What happens if there's an error with the die itself? So let's say a die, after striking tens of thousands, or in the case of modern times, even more, hundreds of thousands sometimes of coins, what happens if the metal in the die weakens? What happens if a piece of that die breaks off? Well, I'll show you what happens. This is a 1920 Buffalo nickel that has what we call a cud on the reverse. So I want you to imagine the reverse die breaking away after weakening due to countless numbers of strikes. And where that piece of the die broke away, there is nothing now. And as we said before, metal has to flow somewhere. So let's look at the obverse. We've got a 1920 Buffalo nickel that the obverse looks just fine. When it was struck, and I will note that it looks just fine, but note up here that there is absolutely detail loss up at the top here. And that's because when the coin was struck, metal has to flow somewhere. So the reverse die had broken away in part in the area that corresponds with the weakening on the obverse. So when that coin was struck, metal, which would have flowed up into the obverse design, is now flowing into nothing. It's flowing into air, basically, where there was reverse die design. And that creates a raised area of metal. This is not a blob of solder that was added after the fact, although people have tried to replicate this that way. This is a legitimate cud error coin, and we call it a cud. It's just kind of a name that was attached over the years in the error hobby. It's not a technical mint term. If you told mint employees that you had a cud, they probably would send you to a doctor. But this is a cud on the back of a Buffalo nickel. So, and it's evidence of, in the three areas of errors that we talk about, I know that in the ANS summer seminar class, we talk about planchet, die, and striking errors. Something goes wrong with the planchet, or the die, or the strike. That's an example of the die.
Yeah. So we only have a few more minutes. I noticed that there was a few questions. I don't know if we want to get to those, and then if we have a few more minutes left, there's a few more coins. But we did mention, hit all the big ones. But so Jim McClellan, did any of these circulate? We said yes, many of them have. Some of them didn't, like some of the broad strikes or the cap dies. It would have been hard pressed to get those into circulation.
For sure.
And they're in impeccable condition, so they likely didn't.
Yeah, and some of them we find early errors. Like I have a mated pair in my collection that came out of a sale a couple years ago. It's pretty extraordinary, and it's an early multi-denominational mated pair, and if you look at the two coins, they're gorgeous because somebody noticed, might have pulled them out of circulation, and that happens with early errors. People pulled them out of circulation knowing that they were unusual, knowing that there was something wrong with them, but not knowing what they were. And as a result, they sometimes can be uncirculated, even if they are indeed errors, because they've just been sitting in a drawer maybe, or in somebody's collection forever.
Yeah. You mentioned that John Krylovich made note of that, the counterfeit French dies on large cents. Literally 5 minutes before we started, Greg looked at this and said, "Oh, this is a coin for John Krylovich." That's kind of fortuitous that you were online, John.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad. And in fact, I think my exact wording was, "I don't think I want to touch this one. I think we're going to let John look at this first."
So if there's any other questions, I thought we had a few more, but it actually looks like we covered all the questions. If there's anyone who wants to chime in, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself or add any more comments. But we have a few more coins that we're going to show.
Jesse, yes. I have one question and comment.
Hey, Larry.
Hi. Thanks to Mary Lannon, I had the good fortune of visiting the San Francisco Mint. And one of the most beautiful and painful sights is this massive cart bin, which had all their errors that they caught, which of course meant they were going to destroy them all.
Yeah, I stay up at night thinking about things like that. Like I really do.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, the stuff that doesn't get through. One question I had, and I know some of the answer, but probably not all of it. What's the legal status of the various types of errors?
So they're legal to own. They got out of the mint through legal channels. And I mean, sure, if something is dramatic and extraordinary and shocking, like you might have described, like let's say it's a cluster of coins that's this big, that strikes upon strikes upon strikes, planchets upon planchets upon planchets. As long as it exited the mint through legal channels, it's legal to own. And in the last many decades, or a bunch of decades, it's been legal to own error coins. There was a period of time where people were afraid that the Secret Service was going to confiscate error coins, and errors kind of had an ebb at that point because you didn't want to pull out your most treasured coins and have them confiscated. But they're certainly legal to own.
Yeah. There's some really odd things, like I think I've seen Roosevelt dimes, proof Roosevelt dimes struck on Eisenhower planchets and weird things like that.
Some weird stuff.
They clearly they weren't found in a proof set.
No.
You question how they got out into the world.
Well, there's a fabled story, which is true, that in the early 70s at the San Francisco Mint, that mint employees were clandestinely striking dramatic proof error coins and then placing them in the oil pan of forklifts that were being serviced outside of the mint. So they'd place them in the oil pan, and they used oil in the oil pan of a forklift. And when that forklift was brought to inspection, people would look. People aren't going to dig around in the used oil. Those forklifts were brought off-site, the oil pans were removed, the proof error coins were washed off, taken out of the oil pan, oil change done, forklift back to the mint, life goes on. But that's where a lot of those fantastical errors from that era come from. Oddity, freak, irregularity, defect, oddity,
there you go.
Fido. Oh, man.
With 3 minutes to spare.
Yeah, have I redeemed myself about the shield nickel? I hope so.
Jesse, I have a question.
Yes.
Take some of the large cents where there's not a very material defect or change. Are those coins then put back with the coins that have no such defect in our trays, or if they're identified as being as you guys have described, are they completely separated out into their own department?
So
their own section?
Here at the ANS, we have all the error coins at the end of each denomination. So the large cents are at the end of the large cents. The dimes are at the end of the dimes. They're not mixed in, with their corresponding date or mint mark or anything like that. So they're essentially segregated but integrated at the same time, if that makes sense. Yeah. That's a good question as far as museology goes and how these weird things have to be kept. We have to know where they are, but since they're a little bit different, we have to keep them separate at the same time.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add in that there's other errors too. I mean, I'm looking at 2 off-center half dimes, which are, we will maybe not take the time to describe them in detail, but I'm looking at 2 off-center half dimes, which are wonderful rarities. So there's other coins here, even in the tray, that we didn't get to. So there's other things here in the collection, and if people haven't visited and they're members, I'd recommend it, because I knew it was, I don't want to say life-changing, but it kind of was when I came and looked at all these fantastic things.
Yeah.
Most of those mint errors that you showed, those major ones, are the result of mint employees making a few extra bucks.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Absolutely. And thank them. Thank you, mint employee from 1873. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So if we have another minute and a half, something like that. If there's any other questions, any comments, concerns, now's the time.
Yeah, and I'll say that if people have questions about mint errors, I'm happy to answer them any time. People can email me at minterrors@gmail.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions or even muse about what might have caused the coin that you have to look the way it did. And of course, I just want to put in a quick plug for CONECA, the Error and Variety Coin organization, that if people are interested, you could look up CONECA online, and just find out more about our organization and perhaps join a community of people who are curious about these things.
Yeah. minterrors@gmail.com. That shows that this guy's the expert. So,
or that I got to it first before any of the other experts that are on this call did.
All right, so we're at the top of the hour again. Greg, thank you so much for coming in. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Ryan, do you want to give a plug for next week? What do we have next week for the long table?
Yeah, so next week will actually be closed, so we won't have one on the 3rd, but on the 10th, Ian Chiju, who is one of our former summer seminar students, is going to be discussing tracing the prize table, the early history of imperial and provincial agonistic coins.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Cheers.